It has been more than 3 weeks that Sayadaw has been giving discourses to the yogis and helping the yogis in their practice. And he also announced at that time that he was going to talk about a topic, namely walking the right path, reaching the right destination, or follow the right path, or practice the right path in order to realize the right destination. In this way, he had announced. However, up to this day, he has not come to this stage. Now, it is starting. He has come to this stage now. And he has explained this, the guide, the good guide, who pointed out the path, the right path, in accordance with the exposition of Desana. Such as 2 days ago we have Buddha. Buddha is like the good guide who points out the right path, or the right way. And such an individual is the Buddha, the Blessed One. And he also mentioned Sumego, or Sumega, the right path, the correct path, straight path, non-crooked path, unbent path, and also the Kemada Bhumi, a safe land of peace and security, the right destination. Such is the Dhamma. And lastly, he also touched on the subject of Savaka Sangha, who walk the right path to reach the right destination. As a result of walking the right path, Savaka Sangha, because they walk the right path and reach the right destination. They practice the right path to realize the right destination. Now the way is open to deal with this subject. Today, 2001, December 27, and corresponding Burmese era, today is a Thursday, we start to talk about or discuss about this subject that he has already announced. The way is open now to the discourse to talk about how, if one walks or practices the right path, one reaches the right destination from this time onwards. This discourse on this subject, walking the right path, reaching the right destination, is not a strange subject. The Buddha himself had said this in the beginning of his discourse, the first sermon, Dhammacakka, the turning of the wheel of the Dhamma, is mentioned this practice of the noble path of eight constituents. And the Buddha has preached this Eightfold Path in the entire 45 years of his Buddhahood. Up to the time of his few hours before his great passing away, Nibbana, he gave the last discourse to the ascetic, wandering ascetic Subhadda. And this discourse that I was going to talk about, right path to the right destination, is based on the discourse on Subhadda Sutta. The fact that he preached this Noble Eightfold Path during the entire 45 years of his Buddhahood, Vasa, is quite reasonable. Every time he gave the discourse, the Buddha gave the discourse, he always included or talked about the noble path of eight constituents. Every time he gave discourse. And this is the discourse which belonged to Buddha himself, separate from other Savakas, other disciples. Whether he talked in a brief way or in an elaborate manner, he always dealt with the noble path of eight constituents, or the Four Noble Truths. That of everything which arises and passes away, all sankharas, the conditioned psychophysical phenomena, are subject to suffering. They are the truth of suffering. And then, what is the origin of this truth of suffering? The craving, lust, wanting, or greed as the origin or cause of suffering. So, firstly, the Buddha talked about the truth of suffering, and then he dealt with the second truth, namely samudaya satya, the truth of the origin or the cause. And since one thinks that these truths of suffering are pleasurable, then if one thinks that they're good, they're pleasurable, then they are bound to crave for them, bound to want them, want to desire them, so long as they think that these things are pleasurable. So, after dealing with this, the truth of suffering and the origin, the truth of the origin, he dealt with the subject of the truth of extinction, Nirodha Satya. Then he talked about the path leading to the truth of extinction or cessation, namely the noble path of reconstitution, which consists of these 8 factors, namely samadhi, the right understanding, the right view; Samma Sankappa, the right aim; Samma Vacha, the right speech; Samma Kammanta, the right action; Samma Ajiva, the right livelihood; then Samma Vayama, the right effort or energy; Samma Sati, the right mindfulness; and Samma Samadhi, the right concentration. All these make up the noble path of 8 constituents, which the Buddha preached as a way leading to the extinction of all sufferings. So when we divide them into 3, we have Sila, Samadhi, Panya, morality, concentration, and wisdom. Morality includes Samma Vacha, Samma Kammanta, Samma Ajiva, the right speech, the right action, and the right livelihood, which is known as morality group, Sila Khanda. Then Samadhi, concentration group, which is made up of Samma Vayama, the right effort or energy; Samma Sati, right mindfulness; and Samma Samadhi, right concentration. And this group is known as Samadhi Khanda, concentration group. And the last one, the Samadhi, the right view or right understanding, and Samma Sankappa, right aim. These 2 make up Panya Khanda, the wisdom group. All these 3 are make up the noble path of 8 constituents. So we have this Sila making up the 3 constituents, the 3 factors of Sila making up, the 3 factors of concentration making up, and then 2 factors, 2 constituents of Panya making up, wisdom group. In short, they are Samma, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, morality, concentration, and wisdom. In terms of Sekha, training, we name them as Sila Sekha, the morality training; Samadhi Sekha, the concentration training; and Panya Sekha, wisdom training. And as sadhana, teaching, we can call them Sila sadhana, the morality teaching; Samadhi sadhana, the concentration teaching; and Panya sadhana, the wisdom teaching. We can give other names also. So, the practice, the path is Sumega, the right path, leading to the right destination. And who gave this method? The Blessed One gave this method, as is given as an epithet of the Blessed One, as Sudesaka Buddha. The Buddha is like a good guide pointing out the right direction. And who walked this path? Who practiced this discipline? Savaka Sangha. the order of disciples, the community of disciples. And they practice the three trainings, Sila, Samadhi, Panya. And the practice is the right path. And what is the result or benefit of that practice? With the practice, one can overcome the three categories of impurities, namely the gross form or transgressive form, the medium form or obsessive defilements, and the refined form or latent tendencies. With the practice of the three trainings of Sila, Samadhi, Panya, and one overcomes these three categories of impurities by stages, and overcoming them, we are coming to the land of peace and safe land. And this is how the Buddha preached the Dhamma. He preached the Dhamma, first of all, in his first sermon, the wheel of the Dhamma, turning of the wheel of the Dhamma to the group of 5, Pencha, Vidya. And in this Dhamma Jagga, Sutta. So, every time, or even if we talk 3 times a day, within 3 times he mentioned, or he talked about this subject, namely the noble path of 8 consequence. Well, it is necessary to give an introduction before we come to the discourse on Subhadra. When the Buddha reached the age of 80, 45 vasa, 45 years of, after 45 years of Buddhahood or his mission, the time came for his final passing away, Parinibbana, and we call it Ayusankara. That is the time when he was to become, to reach Nibbana or to attain Mahaparinibbana, great passing away. And in our tradition, this Mahasakra, 148, the year 148, on the full moon day of Kasol, in the early morning, at the village called Pava, or the city, small town called Pava in India, after having taken food from goldsmith called Sunda, he had this problem, dysentery or diarrhea. He suffered from this disease. This expression, renouncing or letting go, this Ayusankara means, Ayu means life, Sankara is conditioning or safeguarding in this case. He renounced the control of his life. That means he would not control his life anymore. He has been controlling his life with the attainment of fruition, with absorption of fruition, Phala-samapatti. Now he renounced it so that he will not control his life anymore. He was ready to die. So Buddha has been controlling, safeguarding his life, prolonging his life with the absorption of fruition. Every time when he had the time to do it, he was absorbed in the fruit of the practice, Phala-samapatti. Even at the time of giving discourse, when the audience applauded with sadhu, well done, and so on. And even in that moment, maybe a few seconds, he did not lose time in being absorbed in this Phala-samapatti, absorption of fruit, fruition attainment. And he also did the same thing at other times. So with this Phala-samapatti, he safeguarded or controlled his life continuum so that he could prolong his life. But at this moment, from that day, he made a vow or resolution that he will not be absorbed in this attainment of fruition. Such is what is meant by this renouncing Ayu Sankara. This Phala-samapatti, attainment of fruition, being absorbed, or absorption and attainment of fruition, is not only limited to the Blessed One, the Buddha. All Savakas, all trained disciples can practices can absorb this attainment of fruition. If one practices Satipatthana, another way of mindfulness, and reach at least the first path, and once one reaches the first path, one can be absorbed in the attainment of fruition of the first path, in accordance with this first path. And if one practices in accordance with the instructions, then one is able to do that if one has reached the first path consciousness. Now, to be able to practice means to practice in accordance with the instructions. First of all, one must study, learn the correct practice, undertake that practice, then gain the Dhamma, then apply the Dhamma, apply the result of the Dhamma. Then, applying the result of the Dhamma means attainment, the absorption and fruition attainment, or attainment of fruition. With the Phala Samapatti, with Phala consciousness, the fruit of the fruit consciousness, one can become absorbed and make this Nibbana, total ultimate cessation, as the object of one's Phala consciousness, fruit consciousness, Phala consciousness. Either it may be for 5 minutes, it may be for 10 minutes, depending on one's resolution. One can become absorbed in attainment of fruition. Many hours, even one whole day, or 24 hours, one can become absorbed and make this total cessation of Nibbana as one's object of Phala consciousness. Such is Phala Samapatti. So in this way, in order to be able to become absorbed in this attainment of fruition, one must undertake the practice. Otherwise not. And to take up the practice, one must practice in accordance with the instructions. Walk the right path. This is how Dhamma sustains, helps, uplifts the Dhamma practitioner who practices in accordance with the principles of the Dhamma. So in order to be in this situation, one must practice to the satisfactory stage. Then only one can become absorbed in the attainment of fruition. Every Ariya attained person is able to do that. If one does that, one's mind becomes purified. As much as the mind is purified, the materiality, the body also becomes purified with good blood circulation. With the purity of mind, there will be purity of the blood, body. So one can become healthy with building up one's physical resistance against any disease. And this is the result of Phala Samapatti. And as for the Buddha, he made a resolution that from today onwards, he will not be absorbed in attainment of fruition. As one as he did so, the disease entered him, or he contracted this disease. Though he suffered from something like this dysentery, he was wearied physically, but not mentally, as though mental distress, although there's physical pain. Because as for the Buddha, he had overcome to the point of no return this dosa, ill will, which is responsible for mental distress, from the stage of the third path consciousness, Anagami Mega. They depend on that, overcome that. So, although he had the physical pain, physically wearied, he was not mentally wearied, no mental distress, so he was half relieved. So, although he contracted this disease, he was physically wearied, but not mentally. But without taking care, without worrying about this, without being bothered by this physical pain, he traveled from Pava, this place called Pava, to Kushinaga in northern India. Now the distance between Pava and Kushinaga is said to be 1 yojana, which is equivalent to about 6 miles and about 10 kilometers. It is quite evident that there must be a cause or reason for him to take pains in traveling this distance while he was suffering from this disease, the blood coming out due to dysentery, something like dysentery. And then you can imagine to what extent he had this great compassionate feeling towards all beings. especially the suffering beings, to make him travel, though he was suffering from this physical disease, physical pain. Nowadays, or even in those days, you won't find people, very rarely you will find people who would travel this distance under this condition. There's a reason for him to take pains, travel this distance. It is not without any reason. The reasons are two: to give discourses. He traveled this distance in connection with the discourse. From this tiny town of Pava to Kushinaga. Kushinaga was a tiny place, small place, in order to attain the Mahaparinibbana, the great passing away. Although his close attendant, Ananda, objected the Buddha from attaining Parinibbana at this tiny, unknown place which is not known to many people. So there are two reasons. One reason is to preach so-called Mahasudarsana Sutta. The second one is the one who just said, the preaching the Eightfold Path to Subhadha Paripajika, the ascetic, wandering ascetic Subhadha. So these two reasons. And as for the first reason, to speak, to give discourse on Mahasudarsana Sutta, this also is very important in that it can arouse a sense of urgency to those who hear this Dhamma in connection with Sankhara Dhammas, the things which are the formations, mind, body, condition, the formations, they are impermanent and so on. So in this way, one can become aroused with a sense of urgency by listening to this discourse. However, it has not been mentioned in the texts, in the Tipitikas, in the Pali literatures, that anybody has attained to any stage by listening to this sutta, that means the Mahasudarsana Sutta. But as for the other sutta, which is Subhadha Sutta, the Buddha gave this discourse a few hours before his final passing away. It is quite essential in prolonging the Buddha Sasana, to help prolong this Buddha Sasana, or to help Buddha Sasana flourish for a long time and to become prosperous. It's essential for that. So, and also by listening to this Dhamma discourse, brief discourse given by the Buddha just before his final passing away, the Subhadha, ascetic Subhadha, was able to attain the arahantship, the final path, overcoming, eradicating all impurities to the point of no return. If the Buddha had not done this way, I mean travel from Pava to Kushinaga, to attain Mahaparinibbana, the final passing away. Instead, he stayed on at Pava or anywhere else. Then Subhadha was to attain arahantship as a result of the Buddha's discourse, would not be able to attain anything. Instead, he would be suffering all along the rounds of birth and rebirth, samsaric suffering. He was bound to endure this samsaric suffering instead of attaining anything. So because he saw this opportunity to liberate Subhadha, he traveled this area, traveled this distance, because he had so much compassionate feeling to Subhadha Paripajika, the wandering ascetic Subhadha, with much Mahakaruna, great compassionate feeling. So he took pains, although he was suffering physically, he traveled this distance, he walked this distance. Which is 6 miles or 10 kilometers as a sick person. So this much the Buddha had compassion towards all beings. At that time there are many followers. Among them was this close attendant Ananda and Sunda. And they are all tending him, helping him to travel this distance of 10 kilometers. Although it is 10 kilometers, it is quite a long distance, a long journey for a sick person. And how many hours would it take for an ordinary person, a healthy person, to go on foot this distance? You can just calculate. So the Buddha traveled this distance, although he was suffering physically, not with ordinary mentality. Although Buddha was suffering from this disease, he was able to travel this area, and in transit, on the way, he had to stop 25 times. And he started from Pava after taking goldsmith Sunda's food. In the morning, he reached this Kushinaga in the afternoon. The Kushinaga was the place of the sal grove belonging to Mala princess. And you can just imagine how venerable is this Buddha who was able to travel this area with hardship. Is it possible for a healthy elder, any Sayadaw that you know of, however much he has good intentions, Chirana, would he walk even a mile or two on foot to preach somebody? Sayadaw says that he won't be able to do that. Not him. As for the Buddha, he had much Mahakaruna, great compassionate feeling, so much so that he was not bothered by his physical pain, although he was very much tormented, very much wearied with this disease. But he was not bothered about this. He didn't care for this. What he was only caring was only for the liberation of that Subhada, ascetic Subhada. So although he had this serious illness, he took pains to cover this 10-kilometer distance. You can just imagine how much Mahakaruna, great compassionate feeling, the Buddha possessed at that time. So as for today, the Buddha, let us say the Buddha has covered this distance after taking his meals offered by his devotee, goldsmith Sunda, and resting 25 times on the way. He was able to cover this very tiring 10-kilometer distance until at last he reached the place called Kushinaga in northern India, which was the Sal Grove garden belonging to Mala princess, of the Himalayan Mala princess. And how much the Buddha who was the possessor of this great compassionate feeling, Mahakaruna. That much